Alrighty, Chair, we are live.
Good afternoon. I am Robin Rains, and I would like to welcome you to the March 23rd, 2023 Informal Design Review Committee meeting. This is a 9-person committee whose primary function is to perform design review for projects located in one of the city's 3 designated design review areas: the downtown, the riverfront, and the new hotel overlay zoning district. This is a mandatory review, voluntary compliance process with one exception, and that's for hotels seeking to skip council review. Hotels taking advantage of this incentive must receive a positive recommendation from the committee. We are streaming live on our virtual engagement hub, which is accessible through the virtual engagement hub link on the front page of the city website and also linked on the committee page. You can also watch the meeting on the city's YouTube channel, either live or recorded. I will now take roll call. Jeremy Goldstein. Kate.
I'm here.
Okay. Kate. Kaya.
Hello.
Christina Boer.
Hi.
Stephen Lee Johnson is not with us today. Thomas McLaughlin.
Here.
Brian Moffitt.
I'm here.
Oh, okay. Haven't seen you yet. Hello. Ricardo Sejo.
Good morning.
And we have a new member, Michael McDonough. Is he with us today?
Michael just emailed me that he does not have the link to join, so I will send it to him right now, and he'll be joining us shortly. But yeah, Michael is our new at-large committee member, and this will be his first meeting with us. Great, so that's roll call. Great. Great, thanks, Robin. So I'll just go ahead and maybe get it started a little bit here. So this is a special meeting that we called for the informal review of Project Aspire, which is a fairly large proposed development downtown on 3 properties. The First Baptist, basically adjacent to the First Baptist Church. It would redevelop the YMCA and the State Employee Credit Union Bank in 2 different phases. And just to kind of give an overall view of how the review process is going to work here. Essentially, and we have Michael on the line now. Welcome, Michael. Essentially, this review process we're calling a conceptual master plan conditional zoning, where the applicants are seeking the conditional zoning entitlement for the zoning parameters that they've proposed, with relatively minimal detail as compared to a typical conditional zoning project. And they would come back for another round of final review, probably in 2 different building phases. Maybe in as appropriate to their timeline, maybe in a year or 2 following their entitlement process. So kind of the plans and review that will be happening at this conceptual phase will be less detailed than we typically see. And then that final detail will happen at latter phases. This conceptual review will come back to the DRC for a formal review. At some point, it'll go through Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council, just like a regular conditional zoning. When they return to be reviewed for their final rounds of project review, they'll go through the Design Review Committee. They will have to get mandatory compliance with the DRC, just like a hotel project would typically. And as long as they can do that, and they can demonstrate that their building meets the conditional zoning through the Planning and Zoning Commission site plan review process, they would not have to return to City Council. So that's kind of how this is working. It's one of the, we've done this maybe once before in a somewhat similar capacity, but it's kind of a newer way of project review that we're trying for this project due to the size and the complexity of it. And it could be something that's, we see more in the future going forward for certain types of development. But that's kind of it from me. This informal review will be just a conversation between the development team and the committee to get some general feedback, comments, discussion, about the proposed project and design. And I would just like to hand it over to them to introduce themselves. I know we also have a couple of guests from, I think, the YMCA joining us. I don't know if they want to give introductions, and then we just have planning staff that are just listening along as well. But I will hand it over to the project team to give introductions and allow them to kind of take it away.
Thank you, Will, for that introduction. I'm Robert Poppleton. I am development manager for the development team, which is the Furman Company. We're based in Greenville, South Carolina, but have spent a lot of time in Asheville in the last couple of years. And yeah, so I'm grateful for everyone to adjust their calendars to make room for an informal meeting. We really are interested in getting your feedback, especially given just the scale of this project. In our process. So I want to, I promised the Y they wouldn't have to speak today, but we do have representation from both the Y and the church on this call, and they're welcome to jump in if they want to add anything. But we'll also have our design represented from our design teams. And in reacting to some previous feedback received from staff during technical review earlier this month, we have started to make some adjustments to our plan to reflect that. It's still very much in draft form, but some of what we are prepared to share with you today, some of it is new material that is even, our development team is seeing for the first time this week. And so we'll be unpacking that, or happy to unpack some of that with you today as we prepare for our revise and resubmit on the horizon. And before, so that material that we are ready to share includes an improved site plan for the master plan, as well as an improved 3D model, which we can even fly through to assist. I don't know, and maybe I'll start with a question. If members of the committee, if people are generally familiar with our conditional zoning application, because we're happy to provide an overview on that, or we can jump right into some new material if you're already familiar with that application.
I would suggest probably a brief rundown of the overall proposal before getting into the details.
Fantastic, no problem at all. Then I will, at this point, I invite Dave Crabtree from our team, who is leading our design effort, to come on in and introduce yourself, and he'll share screen and help navigate some of our material. Let me see. Dave, are you with us?
Let me see. I have.
Oh, there you are.
I've missed the mute button. It was probably the greatest thing I've ever said. But like most architects, I can continue to talk, so it's okay. We can talk right through it. But yes, thank you for having us, and happy to share more. We can kind of, again, my name's Dave Crabtree, an urban designer and architect. Blessed to work with the Furman group for a number of years, and happy to kind of help walk you guys through where we're currently at. This process has been, multiple years in the working, starting with really in-depth vision sessions with, multi-day kind of sessions, so on and so forth, and many days of follow-up. So that's the broader context without getting in the weeds. And if I share my screen here and share entire screen, yeah.
David, how many years have you guys been working on this?
This probably, I'm almost maybe going on 2 years, I'm guessing. Is that about right, Robert? When you think, from an early inception of just, investigative site studies to thinking, hey, is this the right fit for everybody, to then setting up vision sessions that were multi-sessions. Because then you also imagine there's other background of the YMCA doing planning and, just programming for themselves. How much space would they need? and likewise with the church, what are their future look like? So there's been a lot of, I'll call it community engagement, particularly with the land stakeholders, but also with the surrounding community and bringing in other folks in a more casual basis to kind of build a story around the city. And because ultimately, you guys believe in this, what you build is what you believe, right? In projects, something that Robert and I believe in, move at the speed of trust. So, sometimes things, as you guys are aware, take a good bit of time.
Jeremy,
Jeremy,
I'll mention the church and the Y have been probably in conversation around this concept and project for the last 5 years.
right. And with that, can y'all see my screen? Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay, cool. I'll go through this pretty quickly and just kind of give you a sense, going back on one of our sort of, I'll call grand vision sessions was on the 2021 and went through many activities. And so we wanted to highlight what that is and some of the sort of listening sessions. And we had, a pretty large group of folks going through that, building models, sort of what we call build your future, doing exercises like the day in the life. And sort of that tells the story of who might come to this site from, all walks of life, different backgrounds, the affluent, all the way down to the unprivileged and the homeless for that matter. And how do people encounter the site and feel welcome? And out of that came, real-time modeling with workshop groups, real-time charrettes, thinking about what this project may entail, and really powerful things, as y'all have experienced, come out of these vision sessions. The idea of celebrating people in the gathering, what we call living stones, a sense of beautiful belonging, again, creating this really around what is right for the community of Asheville, serving future generations and the broader resiliency, and, creating a place of healing, thinking about sustainability, but also how are you sort of adding, a place for small startup businesses and the broader in the world of both the Y and the church, ecumenical benefit. How do you sort of put this in I'll call it the middle of it all, if you will, and bring people into it? And that entailed a lot of listening sessions around what is Asheville, what makes it this sort of granular scale and the sort of, I'll call it beautiful grit, if you will. The topography, the access to nature and craft and so on and so forth. And again, I'm speeding through this just to be respectful to your time. You're aware of the site, I'm sure. And so this is our broader sort of site area, church being at the middle of this guy, Y currently here. You've got, Charlotte, College, Central, Oak, Woodfin as the surrounding streets. And, again, zoning overviews and all that I won't go in depth. The site located in the broader context of the mountains as a background, really 360, but particularly just to our east.
Dave, can you put that on full screen?
Yeah, control.
Just to assist.
I can. Good.
Two more down, full screen.
There we go. There we go. For some reason, it's not doing it.
All right, sorry. Maybe we just continue.
Yeah, that's what I was doing. Control L. Something is not. Yeah. I can also zoom in where needed. Again, the site and gateways and approaches. Considering again a lot of view angles towards one of the defining features of the church being the dome. And that was very considered throughout all ways of approach. The idea of what we call the mountain and the valley, scaling larger buildings to the perimeter outside, and then the sort of valley, if you will, sort of framing the church in the spiritual space in the middle. The site is zoned for 265 foot for a good bit of the site. In fact, 265 foot comes all the way much further right about into here. And then likewise right about into here for this portion of the site. And it is designed as this darker blue zone here is a hotel district, which we're not using that much for the hotel, but that is part of the zoning. These are the height as currently zoned. So 265 foot, 265 foot, and then you have the intermediate zone. We're not proposing to use that, and we're really looking at the totality of the site and how we can scale down to the church. So diagrammatically, you know, we're really in our higher zones here at the blue, the more intermediate zone here, and then we've created sort of what we call the sort of church, the dome height zone here. And then of course we're not building anything substantial. There's a lot of buffering around the church, as that was very important to them. Just the broader phasing again, you know, the church here, existing Y was over here, larger scale development to the perimeter, and then scaling down. We did knowing the scale of modern development and the size of parking garage, a goal of granularity was very important. So, you know, bringing in sort of vias and alleyways that would be more retail activated pedestrian scale is the intent of breaking down some of these blocks. And the phasing, for example, would be more phase one hotel and YMCA mixed use for phase one. And as phase two comes on board, whether that's taken down as one phase or still has some, I'll call it 2A, 2Bs and incremental through these multiple buildings. Most of our parking, or all of our parking other than street side, is identified more in structured parking that's then screened and wrapped with other program along with street side parking. And that broader master plan looks like this from the aerial view. Again, church, the phase one, phase two zone, and this may be broken down into multiple sub-phase of phase two. And where you start to see the sort of interior vias that would be more retail focused, very intentfully framing the church dome along different areas, even making, you know, very specific urban form to frame the dome from a distance, you know, shaping the buildings, if you will, along these edges to open up that view vista back towards the dome. In our master plan, because we're really looking for height and area and bulk, what we've tried to do is accompany it with like kind development. So, you know, around the sort of perimeter of the imagery that's a little bit more generic in terms of massing is more specific streetscape and other sort of activation along with the sort of massing imagery.
And I'll just make a quick comment to add to this. I mentioned in the onset, we'll have some live models that we're going to share with you that reflect some of the changes. As you're reviewing the material David's presenting, one of those changes is going to be around that hotel. Currently it showed a mixed use. It is going to be reflected as a singular use in a hotel use, and will not have what is orange currently representing what residential will not be part of that building. You're also going to see more development along, and David's probably about to get to this, but yeah, exactly where his cursor is, the retail frontage along Charlotte, activating the Charlotte Street frontage was something that we've heard in this process as being very important. So we have solved for a more significant commercial presence there.
Why the change on the hotel from mixed to single use?
We are farther along in conversations with a actual hoteler prospect partner. And so it just makes more sense, kind of market driven. There are going to be other areas that we have focused residential and that we're currently exploring, but you know, basically market drove reducing to a singular use for that building.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Robert, we don't expect to be losing residential units overall, because it is one of the key sort of markets that is sort of making this a sustainable development. So it's not as if residential is going away versus shifting to other portions of the site.
I agree with that. Yeah, maybe even increasing.
Mm-hmm. We do really recognize the affordability components as well. And with that, again, just back to some of the sort of views, coming from along Oak Woodfin and, seeing the dome off in the distance, seeing the buildings sort of scaling down. The massings are intended to reflect what may be. We do and have been very transparent. We're meeting the pedestrian scales and breaking down of the streetscape and so on and so forth. Final design may have some variations of these, but would be, around these sort of intents. Again, looking at phase one, where the sort of hotel to the right, church dome to the left, back away, standing at the sort of front of one of the current sort of church drop-off areas along Oak Woodfin, and then looking back. When you start to imagine what we've called, when we will rename Fellowship Way, that is really intended to be more of a festival, sort of street, zero curb line, streetscaping, decorative lighting, things like that. So when you, and that's easy sometimes for us as a design team to imagine all the things it may be. You guys are also creative folks. Again, that's where some of our supplemental imagery is hoping to supplement the vision. Activating corners, defining how we design the corners, all of those are critical pieces that are coming to light. This is the sort of street section that's between the church. It was very critical. We maintained a sort of 90 to 100 foot plus or minus between us and the church. And that was for their comfort. They do like the nature of being urban, but also realizing they have folks that, elderly folks that need to have some proximity of parking next door, at the drops off zones and things like that. However, we have in these imagery stripped away a lot of the streetscape just so you could see the street section. You would imagine this, and we'll show this later in our civil plans, where you start to layer in more of the benches, street trees, street lighting, so on and so forth. This is the internal via. And master plan wise, let me just give me 1 second. I will relocate you just to understand. This view is sitting here, looking up this sort of sloping street. We have about 40 foot of grade between over here to the left to over here to the right, really from central up to here. So when we go back to this sloping street in context, you understand kind of where you are. We imagine this. It is. While it looks narrow, it's not as narrow as Wall Street. This is a 70 foot or so street section. And again, sort of imagining retail coming in and more walkability, sidewalk dining, things like that happening, also indicative of the sort of imagery that we're showing on the right-hand side. And again, I'll kind of make some attempts to zoom in and apologize for the not being full screen, but this might be a street that's better for pavers and such. A slow street, we do imagine cars being integrated. We've discussed whether it may have an option of a non-car zone on a full-time basis, but certainly would be shut down at certain points to be only for pedestrians. But at this point, it is an integrated slow street with both vehicles and people on a regular basis. And we feel that could be compatible when you add in a lot of streetscaping elements, like what's seen in the imagery along the right. You find that, again, even on Wall Street, right? It's a very slow street. Cars still happen, but people still, I would say, enjoy priority there. At the footsteps of the church and sort of the drop off that we would have there, residential kind of at the door, if you will, at the threshold of the church is sort of living lifestyle. And some examples of what that may feel like. We imagine this to be more of open park area with public space, accessible, stepped lawns, outdoor seating, could be movies on the lawn to yoga in the park, and a wide variety of programming that could happen in some of these spaces. So that kind of brings us really where we are today. Some of the comments we heard were, well, what does in terms of the landscaping that was shown in our illustrative master plan was very illustrative, if you will. So what we've done was take a look at pedestrian access, defining sidewalk, street sections, planting what we would be able to keep, what might need to be replaced. And those are the things I would like to kind of pivot to and share with you. In fact, I might try something else here that it would allow me to go full screen, and hopefully it doesn't crash the world here. Is my screen still sharing?
Yes.
And again, I'm going to, at the risk of this not working, I can pivot back to where we were. But give me 1 second. And this may allow us to kind of zoom in a little bit more fluidly. So overall, I'll kind of zoom in here and start. What we are sort of looking at is preserving many of the existing trees. We'll show you an exhibit, but the streetscaping, we imagine what's noted in purple to be a little bit more streetscaped, paver, zero curve, festival street kind of vibe. What's shown in red is the expanded sort of sidewalks that are all meeting or exceeding the 10-foot. And then starting to note tree wells and things that would start to help break that scale down along. These aren't going to be public streets. These will be internal sort of vias or internal drives, if you will. So in some cases, to give more back to the pedestrian scale, our tree spacing in some areas spreads out a little bit more in the phase. We do have the elongated and increased hotel drop-off. That was a comment that came up. Underneath what we've talked about with the hotels is sort of trash and sort of back of house loading does happen underneath the building. So starting to identify where some of those things may happen. Ingress egress was some of the comments and questions. So while these were noted on our master plan, very being more explicit about those, and the proximity and distances meeting the sort of DOT standards required along Charlotte Street, for example. As we move around, again, defining the sort of sidewalks. Blue is what's also where we'd have more public benches, flexible lawn space, sidewalk connections coming up along the sort of mixed use office buildings that are anticipated for retail, indoor, outdoor retail. The church drop off and sort of roundabout, ingress egress to the parking deck, and also ingress egress to the parking deck. And also recall there's, that 30 to 40 feet, depending on where we take it, there's internal ramping that if you came in here, you're able to sort of ramp down and sort of come out here and likewise ramp up. We don't have and do not want any ingress egress to the parking deck here. One, because of the complexity, and two, to maintain the sort of pedestrian feel. As I noted before, we are very intensely trying to isolate parking to, in terms of bulk parking in these two zones, to really make the streets more of an urban feel. And again, starting to note sort of tree wells and blue light bollards and blue for benches and so on and so forth along these internal vias. And then similar along in here, we do imagine this to be much more of a textured paving sort of, I don't want to use cobblestone, may not be what we find there, but the sort of festival street section would be also anticipated in here.
David, can I ask a quick question? Where you enter Central Avenue to the parking deck there, where the cars enter, is there also pedestrian access to the site on that side?
That's a good question. If I understand your question, you're asking about how we egress underneath the residential building has a throughway, a big sort of, and yes, we would anticipate pedestrians be able to move through here as well as cars. And so that is anticipated. Is that the
Yes,
question?
thank you. Mhm.
Absolutely.
I think there was
Um,
another question, Dave, just to comment on the width of the sidewalks along Woodfin and Charlotte, or the perimeter.
These guys are all beyond the 10-foot, and in most cases more than. I don't have the CAD model up, and our civil team could give me some better feedback. They're also on the line. Am I correct that we're closer to 12 to 14 foot on some of those, or am I?
Yeah, Dave. Matthew Badger here, Britt Peters. Those sidewalks are all 10 feet with tree wells basically placed alongside as necessary.
We have the existing trees here. So
Yes,
for
I was talking about central.
yeah, so we have that guy here. What are these sides? Just for proximity of what's our dimension there?
Those are 10-foot sidewalks.
10 foot. And then these guys here.
Those are also 10 foot, but those have tree wells placed since we don't have room for landscaping up to the existing curb.
So these are your tree wells, the
Correct.
squares.
That's correct.
And just to re-emphasize, I think Christina, maybe it was your question about access from Plan North on Central. We don't show those sidewalks currently, but we absolutely intend to provide them. So that may be a refinement that we'll be able to make between now and our resubmission.
And is the retail on that building floor facing the interior, or is it facing Central Avenue?
Both. The anticipation would be both. Again, we don't have final designs for the building, so
Sure.
we could have in this anywhere there would be some loading and service needs for the residential building there. But ideally, we would be encouraging community programming, retail, small retail, to, food and beverage, to service retail. You might even find in some of our residential developments that they're kind of creating sort of co-working clubhouse type vibe at the ground floor, so it's instead of the amenities always being up at the penthouse kind of vibe. So there could be some activation that way as well.
Okay, thanks.
And some of the things that we are doing that, I know we are very familiar and supportive of the sort of build two lines. But because of, we're trying to give a good street section in here, is where I was describing, we have the 13 to 14 foot. We are giving a 26-foot drive here. Those for fire access, that's kind of pinched the site a little bit, where initially, and I don't know if we could find a way to get it to work, we were actually looking, could we do a more narrow street section here, not to basically to squeeze the drive lanes down and give more back to the collective sidewalks. So that's a question. I want a parking lot. But the idea again is, we're trying to give as much to the sidewalks as we can, balancing dimensional stability of what does a residential building need, what does an office building with need, so on and so forth. And as big as the site is, it actually does get very tight, believe it or not. Some of those sort of, I'll call it urban relief zones, is like the corner plazas, and that's very intensely trying to pull some of that away to then, give people some visual, so you're not just seeing the sort of residential building on the corner versus getting glimpses of the office and retail just beyond. And that kind of happens also at the hotel. When we go back here, we sort of created more of a corner plaza zone there as well. Defining a sort of corner plaza zone here around the YMCA and office entry being here, YMCA entry being both here and here. Little things that we're doing that would not show up in this master plan is there is a through connection for the church. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I have a little bit of allergies today. But there's a connection through into the parking deck. I'm trying to think if I've missed anything else. This kind of gets you the broader exhibit. what I want to do is, I know tree saving was a big question mark. And so let me pivot over to that guy. Well, a couple other civil can chime in here as well. I just want to give you guys the sort of root of things. You'll start to see turning radiuses and sort of pull in zones and all that, you know, for greater detail. So we're trying to give you some of the a little more technical, just to give you a sense that things are starting to work and how we anticipate them to work. But I know this exhibit here is more critical to you guys. I'll start with the bad part and go good. There are some beautiful mature trees here, but once we start to pull in the sidewalk perimeter and also start to build out the liner space along the deck, that is putting a lot of pressure on those root systems. And so what we're looking at doing here is creating a planting zone along the sort of perimeter, pull the sidewalk to the buildings, have a planting zone, have tree wells where needed for street trees. But in any place where we can save, I can assure you, you know, we are saving as many trees as possible. In part, a lot of this goes back to the dimensional stability of the need for a hotel, having a setback from the parking deck for light, air, and openness, fire, life safety. But then also back to just having a fair buffer to the church and the scale of the church. And as we're scaling from tall down, that is, you know, we're trying to do our best to balance out all of those things. But we have identified in the latest exhibit where new street trees would be coming in like these guys to sort of define the fellowship way there. To existing ones that are being maintained, to then the cyan ones that are also being shown in as new. Cyan being new, meeting your street standards, and then the green being more on our site and being for internal drives. But with that, I do want to turn this over to civil, and did I miss anything? And you can reshare screen or share anything that you wanted to highlight. I was just trying to get us through all. I think we've got through all of our material, and we're a half hour in or a little more, so we could have time for more discussion. And civil, do you have anything?
Yeah, no, Dave, I think you did a great job of explaining our plans. The only thing is I don't know if you want to spend a little more time on sheets 2 through 4, just they're a little bit more blow up, have a little more detail about the area, some dimensions, the driveway spacing, things like that.
Let me go back, and again, I can try to share and then you narrate and you direct me where you'd like to go, or if you would like to share, that's also fine. What I'm doing, this is the second sheet, right? Yeah. So you go for it. You tell me where would you like.
Yeah. So just I know that there were a couple of comments already. So just in response to those comments, we've gone ahead on these blow up sheets and we've kind of shown some of our driveway spacing to help kind of define where we're going to be installing these driveways. And I did also see a question on here if we were going to be maintaining as many of the trees as possible on woodfin and oak. And of course, we are going to maintain as many as possible. There are, I think, one that we think may come down already just due to a driveway location. But we were going to do all we can to maintain all of those trees. The proposed sidewalk along that area is intended to basically be from the existing sidewalk back. So that's how we're going to go ahead and maintain those trees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what he's describing is we're kind of holding that planting zone that you previously had.
Yeah, and then you can see we've kind of done a little artistic feel there with a little paver area there to the north, just to give a general idea of what we think might this area might look like. And then there's some better dimensions to help define the site a little bit better in space. And you can go on to the next page probably.
One of the other
drivers around this festival street is the ongoing safety and consideration for the childcare traffic that occurs there daily, in addition to the needs of church circulation. So that's why you're seeing some of these drop-off zones, as well as smarter designs to be traffic calming throughout that space.
Correct. And keeping that drop-off area more to the left, away from your drive there on Charlotte there, to maintain your better stacking space, to try and help out as much as possible there at that driveway. Probably go on and
One
show
of the
the
other
next.
comments was pull-in as well. We did do angled parking, or adjusted plan from 90-degree to angled parking in this direction.
Correct. All in an effort to make this feel like less of a through street and more like a pedestrian friendly, slow traffic area.
And we also recognize that this does occur in the city in a few other locations where you're kind of mixing pull-in, back-in parking, and well, not back-in parking, but pull-in parking with traffic. Our goal is, like, I think if we say slow street enough, we all are here to try to make this a pedestrian environment.
Yeah, and one thing that Dave didn't talk about is that we have planned in here is underground detention. We plan on doing water quality with infiltration and underground. Right now, ADS storm chambers is what we're planning on using, but we have separate systems for both phases of the project, and that's how we plan to do a more less obtrusive water quality and water retention.
Yeah, good point.
And
Anything
probably
else on
go to the next sheet.
Yeah.
What do you mean about less obtrusive? Could
Just-
you,
Sorry, rather than just having like an above ground, trying to find space for an above ground water quality or water detention pond, and then doing water quality that way, to keep it underground and then make all the area more pedestrian friendly rather than dedicate any area to that, is what I meant.
Yeah.
I got it. I just wanted to say something about that, because I think there's a real opportunity here to think about these green areas, and even the way we're, proposing the street trees is like, how can the green areas or landscaping be more than just the icing on the cake, but could actually be used as infrastructure? I mean, could we be treating some of the stormwater before we take it underground? So thinking about, there's a lot of great opportunities and examples in other cities where they've incorporated green stormwater infrastructure into pedestrian areas, that it actually is a beautiful amenity.
Yeah,
Thinking about that at grade, and then also green roofs, managing a lot of that stormwater before it even hits your stormwater system. So I think that a project at this scale has a chance to really sort of change the way that we think about urban design and infill development. And also just want to point out that this area is located in part of the city that has a really high heat vulnerability. And so thinking about urban heat island and how we can be using green infrastructure, green stormwater infrastructure as a way to not only improve the stormwater management, but the larger community benefit.
I will say, just on the development side, not familiar with as much the last comment, but we'll be exploring that with our team. But we are familiar with a lot of the practices in stormwater management through the green areas and applying them in other projects. So it's certainly something we'll emphasize as this design matures. So I think you can be looking for that in future iterations.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add one more thing, is that at grade, that doesn't have to look like a detention pond or more suburban type treatment. You won't even notice that it's stormwater, managing stormwater, and it will look, and you can use really amazing and beautiful materials. And so just thinking about the way that you're thinking through the design of these other spaces and your buildings and the pedestrian environment to be taking that same level of design thinking to these green areas.
Yeah, I love that idea. We're doing that on a handful of projects right now. So I'm with you 100%. You want to join the design team? Yeah, but like gabion walls and things like that you could start to sort of create, transition zones and cool walks and things like that cross over different plant typologies that help sort of filter. I was taking some notes along the way. So yeah, I like where you're heading.
Okay, so since you're excited about that, I'm going to add one more thing. Asheville has a real problem with stormwater. We have a lot of challenges. We don't, so anything that we can do to reduce the amount of water that is hitting our existing system that, is deteriorating over time, needs to be maintained, just alleviating the pressure on that system is something that our community is going to benefit from in terms of money and investment. And so I think that there's a lot happening here, and because it's new construction, there's a lot of things that you can do up front to help save money down the road.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, and then also slowing it down. So more impervious surfaces, or when you were thinking about pavers, or like you were mentioning, green roofs help in that way, right? I mean, they kind of do some absorption, and it's not all just collecting on a roof and immediately hitting the storm system. It slows the volume down. So I think all of those are kind of in line with where you're talking about. Actually, this I know back to the question earlier, we are kind of showing where these drives do kind of come through in some of these exhibits.
Dave, it looks like we got one question. Michael, did you want to?
Hey, yeah, thanks. I'm really impressed with the project. I think possibly the weakest corner is the corner of Charlotte and College Street. Robert mentioned there were some evolutions there in wrapping some street pedestrian elements in front of the structured parking there. Do you have any images other than the kind of 3D masses of what that is evolving towards?
Yeah, that's a good point. So let me give you, this is the sort of broader sort of model, if you will. And then let me, at the risk of just, did a kind of basic height exhibit so you can kind of get a sense of where we're at. But let's see here, conceptual massing view. And again, hopefully we don't break the internet here. I'll click on a view and everything crashes, or maybe we'll stay functional here. I'm not gonna move for a second because okay, cool. I'm gonna let the computer do what it needs to do here because
well, and maybe while you're looking for that, I'll add another comment. I think, and this is maybe for staff, the intersection of College and Charlotte Street is horrible. It's a suburban intersection, and our wonderful downtown fabric disintegrates quickly when you get close to that intersection. It's too wide, too broad, too many lanes, and that southbound turn lane that kind of bites into your sight there is kind of a suburban gesture. Is there an opportunity for the city to kind of explore tightening up that intersection? And I was involved in the review of the hotel across the street to the south, and I thought they did a pretty good job of pushing up to the corner there, to the opposite corner of Charlotte and College.
Right here.
Yeah, they did a pretty good job of pinching that intersection as well as they could. And I think you're stuck reacting with an urban form to a suburban intersection.
Right.
So I would encourage staff, if you're involved, to see what we can do about remaking that intersection. I'm counting 6 lanes coming south from the interstate, becoming 7 lanes with that right turn, which I guess if we can urbanize that right travel lane. I don't know. It seems like there's a missed opportunity to kind of like reconfigure that street while we're at it.
Yeah, you're bringing a concern of ours up is because look, we're urbanists and we believe in the sort of human experience. And we are all in on adding the liner space and all that, but our concern overall is the speed of the traffic there. And whatever we build, we'll do everything we can, but without some other traffic calming and things beyond our control. And I know this is multiple layers of government agencies on this, particularly here. Your point is well noted. We've had a lot of those conversations on, on this street section.
I see a comment from Fadila. Is there opportunity within city staff to explore that if there's staffers?
I just
This
wanted
is
to highlight,
Lucy Crown. I'm the transportation planning manager, and we're also very concerned about that corner. It is a state owned road is the problem, but we just heard about this project last week and would like the opportunity to take a look at this. We're very concerned about bike facilities, which are not existent in this area right now, and the amount of cars heading from Charlotte Street down College and onto Oak Street and Woodfin are all areas that we need to fortify our bike infrastructure. So
We
I don't
certainly
really
have.
know what the answer is because we're feeling very rushed trying to catch up at this point, but would really like to sit down and talk about that.
Gosh, you would think there's plenty of paving there to add bike lanes.
Right.
Have y'all considered a right-hand turn in only into the gap between the hotel and the structured parking there on that right-hand turn in there from Charlotte Street?
Yeah, it's not allowed based on state standards. And so things we are looking at right in here and right out only. But this portion here, because of the proximity and the curve, it was not allowed. We do while
So
we're
we've had some interface already today with NCDOT where we explored some of those conversations, Mike, and we're very much in favor of improving safety along this area, and if we can support improved bike infrastructure, cycling infrastructure, that would be a big win for the community. I see that, but also for the project. Regarding connectivity, I will mention something that's not part of our master plan area, but that will be part of our exploration with the church as partner in this project. Is in Plan North, establishing just on the north side of the church. There's some existing throughway we think that could be activated for pedestrian traffic at the very least. This doesn't show up in this map or in this site plan, but there are some opportunities that at least in the interim we can improve connectivity for pedestrian traffic into downtown through the project. And so those things aren't given yet in this project, but certainly, we're all for improving infrastructure throughout the area, especially along Charlotte Street.
right. And we do imagine, for example, while we haven't shown building being here, that, depending on the hotel flag and connectivity to the garage, that, there would be, some level of design that would happen here, whether it's, building or whether it's, sort of relief, sort of public plaza, parkish kind of vibe. But it would be still a critical design element here. There is a pretty good grade change here. So just FYI, if my memory's right, we'll call this 14 foot. We'll call this 0 foot. We'll call this 8 foot, somewhere thereabouts, right? This here is about, I think, I'll call it 3. So just to get you a sense of the broader kind of slopes are doing this. So when we're coming in here, any of this loading is actually happening subgrade because we're holding the grade down. So if you're on the sidewalk here, you would be at an upper zone, if you will, just to kind of create some context.
We have a couple questions. Christina, I think yours might have come in first.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this project, and thank you for the presentation. I'm glad we just talked about Charlotte and College, but I also want to draw attention to Central Avenue because I think that's really your gateway to your most residential neighborhoods. I think that's where families walk when there's festivals downtown. There's tons of bikers coming in that way because it's a local street. And I think, I like you talked about this kind of pass through that you have from the church to the parking lot. And I think it'd be really nice to see that on that building opening up so that pedestrians could access and see, I think from a design standpoint, but also just from a business standpoint, to pull them into the project. I think it'd be really nice to see some stairs, maybe an opening going up to the plaza.
We imagine that. Y'all familiar with the what's the city? Oh, it's city something in Washington D.C. They have some really cool pass-through thresholds where they, not that we need digital screens here. It's not the right fit. But that idea of celebrating thresholds, I think this could be a really cool sort of celebrate threshold. So,
Yeah, and that street could really use some activation. I don't know if you have been on it lately, but there's a lot of homeless under the bridge in the back.
Right.
And but it's used by the local community often. So it'd be nice to activate it and get some more traffic through there.
Yeah, a lot of times when I stay in town, I either stay here or over on the other side of town. That's a little more neighborhood urban vibe, but I like these little spots and have spent a lot of time walking through. And there's a couple of little cool little restaurants and grocers up here that are kind of cool.
Yeah, so. Liberty Street. Yeah. I think it'd be great to pull some of that culture onto Central.
Brian, did you have a question?
Yeah, I've got several comments. Piggyback on to what Michael and Christina were talking about. So there's a lot going on with this project. I appreciate kind of what you're doing with the height zones and the way you're pulling things away from the church. I'm a little concerned that there's kind of this, some of the interior of the site feels walled off in terms of the massing. And so, trying to invite people in and through these buildings deeper into the site is going to be pretty important. One, we've already talked about, Charlotte Street. Activation and bringing and activating that pedestrian area. I know you've got to put the parking somewhere, but you're kind of with that parking right now for the Y building and up for the hotel that's kind of turning that. We've already talked about that corner. I feel like you're going to need something on that corner of College and Charlotte in terms of maybe it's not a building, but it needs to be a designed element. That this is a gateway for to the city for a lot of people. You come through the tunnel and you come down to this intersection, and this is always where I feel like I'm really entering downtown. And here's that building, and I know I've seen some of the massing studies. I know you're doing some neat stuff the way that you're kind of pulling that building and bringing it to a point. But at the pedestrian level, I really want to feel that. I want to feel that entrance and not just kind of look at the corner of a parking deck. I want it to pop a little bit more than that.
Part of Brian, just please continue after this, but I wanted to insert that the conceptual hotel program that we believe will land on this site is going to be heavily or is going to emphasize in a big way food and bev and experience that spills out onto that corner. We recognize on the development team that downtown experience doesn't extend here currently, or it's limited to say the least, but it's so close. It's very close to Pack Square. It's very close to a lot of the best offerings that downtown has to offer. So we're looking to pull that into the site through the hotel. In the hotel, so we agree, and getting that right is going to be very important for us. We like David is designing as we speak, this showpiece with the hotel, I think, will end up having a connectivity piece to round that corner to the rest of the project.
Well,
But yeah, we're
I,
hearing you loud and clear and on this aligned on that.
and that little corner, that little pedestrian activation piece, I think is going to have to wrap somehow and extend up. That needs to be a showpiece. And so, and then again, the way I'm thinking about this, the way it's been masked right now is that it feels a lot like, you've built a wall around the site, a little bit monastery-like, and you're keeping people out of it. And so when you're designing these, and even as you're cutting things through, try to bring people, the city on into the site. I think that's one of the things, at least that's what I've listened to Christina for a year and a half now. I know that's what she was saying along Central, is that she's wanting you to, not just bring people beside the buildings, but in through the buildings, into the site, through the site, across the site, away. So I'll just make that kind of as a general note as you're working on it. I think you've already done some of that with it, and I really like the big green piece that you've got, and the way you kind of cut that one building away so that you're trying to keep some angles. You even had one of your diagrams, I think it was page 23 of the conceptual packet, had a couple of views of the church that you were trying to maintain. One of them is not an actual view because you can't actually see anything of the church from the highway because of all the trees. But I appreciate you at least recognizing that. I will say that that one, like sacred views from the highway, that doesn't actually exist. That's a nice diagram though. Kudos on your diagrams. One thing I'll say is that I feel like you have talked about the church a lot, and you've talked about, the church is wonderfully bizarre, right? It's Ellington's, it's just Ellington, so he has these cascading forms. He's doing a lot of stuff. But there's nothing on the site really reacting to the church in terms of design. You've got this little kind of drop-off area in front of the front portico, and then you've got an off-center thing. I know this is early. I'm just saying that I don't think the buildings are starting to react to the church, but they're not really doing that, and they're not capturing. I think you should lean into the bizarreness of the thing. And take it forward, make it modern, make it current. But there's a lot going on that you could even be doing a little bit more in terms of what you're doing in your site plan around that. Right now, it kind of feels like we don't want to touch it, and so we've kind of pulled away from it a little bit, and we've brought the building scale down. But that's all I've really heard. And then on the side, it just looks like kind of a little bit of a checkbox. A landscape thing, which I know that's all we're at right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm encouraging you to really think about that green space and design that not just as a space between the buildings, but an actual element in the design.
I should probably let my design team react to that, but here I am. I'm going to jump in. I think that, yes, even though we're not at design yet, we have spent a lot of time thinking about these concepts. One thing we haven't emphasized a lot yet, but is a big part of phase one, and phase one's a tight site. We're trying to do a lot with phase one, and we need to do a lot with phase one. But the YMCA in green, that's, at least for the Charlotte experience, the design concepts that are in our development currently, that is going to be a highly activated and attractive building that really pulls in the passerby, right? So there's going to be a lot of glass, a lot of activation through the functions of the Y. So I think we are going to have an opportunity to pull people in that way. Again, the tightness of phase one's buildings in the hotel and building one and YMCA are going to be limiting. We're still going to address it through design when we get to design, but now at the master plan scale, we also see phase two has a huge opportunity to accomplish everything you're describing, and Christina too, in a bigger way. We have a bigger canvas there. We already have areas that are going to be reserved for these buffer zones that can be inviting sources for the project. So yeah, we're going to get into a lot of that in the next phases of design. And I think, just to emphasize the position in phase one that the Y will help solve for, at least on Charlotte, I think in a big way, while we provide for the needs of the church. That's where you get some of these otherwise unconventional layouts for that, the Festival Street, Street C here, Interior Street. And it's because we need to preserve the daily functions of the church.
But I want to address, though, we do believe in what you're saying here. And admittedly, we are very, I want to say we're being specifically generic in some of this because we haven't designed this space and this space and, you know, these spaces. We're showing you what we know is the technical requirements of sidewalks, and we've stripped a lot of that away. But it is very intended that this becomes the sort of piazza and the doorstep of the church in sort of celebrating the space between the sort of future buildings here and here and that sort of the church. And the best we can do at this point is share with you kind of, you know, some of the example imagery of what we anticipate, you know, articulated residential being across the way or outdoor sort of, you know, the types of things that we would imagine being there. Is it's not a street, right? It's for people that happens to have cars, or, you know, it's very much in the spirit of what we're, you know, trying to break down through our precedent image at this stage.
I'm just reacting to, you've got a little green dot that's slightly off center from the portico, which is the, you know, a significant element. It's the very first thing on the National Historic Register application. And it's like, it's not centered, but it's not off center enough to make it important. It's that little white dot in the middle of the screen.
Yeah, right here.
Yeah, that guy. So it's that kind of stuff that's making me go, okay, that's a placeholder. They're going to do something. Make it, in other words, you know, it's typical design stuff, right? You know, if you're not going to have it line up with anything, then make it apparent what you are doing, what you're reacting to, you know, make the tension mean something. Yeah, that kind of stuff. So I know you guys are still working on that. I don't want to beat that drum too much. One last comment and I'll quit. I put on my downtown design commission hat. Catherine was nice to you. You're going to have to do green roofs. That was not a suggestion. So if you're looking for a CZ and you're looking for a positive recommendation, I just wanted to go ahead and make that clear.
Yeah.
It's kinder this way.
Is that in your, maybe we didn't recognize it?
No, that's not you know, when you're doing a CZ, you're asking for, you know, this is a big enough building. You're asking for things, and this is a huge project, and you know, we're actually looking at even incorporating that in the future codes. That's a discussion that we're having right now between different parts of the staff. I'm just letting you know that that's coming, and go ahead and start designing around it.
Are y'all considering, like a lot of places, as a incentive bonus? Like if you provide, you know, kind of, it's the way you're sort of framing it now, if I'm hearing you, it's like, might not be a requirement, but it's like, hey, we need these, and we believe in them too. Yeah, it makes sense.
Respectfully, I don't necessarily agree with Brian.
No, he does not. Hey, Jeremy.
So no, I just don't think it should be arbitrary. I think there is either a rule or there isn't a rule. And if you require it from one conditional zoning, I don't think then you have to require it for all. I agree with your goals. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think, or I'm convinced that we have the ability to just arbitrarily say, I'm not going to approve anything unless it has a green roof.
No, we're or at least the discussions we've had is, you know, this is part of our will be part of the stormwater and the tree canopy, and there's other pieces to it. I know from past experience that a green roof's not something you can just paint on the roof after the fact. You got to design around it from the beginning. So I'm letting you know that there's, you know, you need to start thinking about how you can incorporate some green roof. Obviously, you can't do it everywhere, and you can't do it even in all the roof that you're doing, because you need somewhere to put mechanical equipment, so on and so forth. But go ahead and start thinking about how you can incorporate some of that. And we're not talking about necessarily habitable green roofs. I know you guys know all this. If you have any questions, ask Kate. She's the expert. So
I think it's a good segue to a subject I really want to take advantage of, this brain trust gathered and pool a lot of your feedback to market conditions, right? I mean, so at the end of the day, this project needs to be feasible. We are trying to design something that meets community need, that meets a lot of our sustainable objectives, meets partners' goals, but also can be absorbed by the market. And so that brings me to our building one. Our first phase has the elements we've reviewed that include a hotel in a massing form that I don't think is going to change too much. It's definitely not getting taller than what we're proposing. And then we have the YMCA, this very important community anchor feature. It's this in-between space that we are.
Can you point those out on the screen, please, while he's talking?
Yes,
Point
that's
to
right.
He's talking
So-
about, everybody knows.
Hotel here. The church, I'll just put a C, is to our back. This is Oak and Woodfin here. This is what we've called Fellowship Way, and recognize that street name cannot be used, but the internal sort of Fellowship Way, and then the YMCA sort of anchoring that
Can you
sort
go
of.
back to the site plan that shows all the phases and the buildings and point it out that way, please?
Yeah. So that view I was just sharing with you is sitting here, right, and looking at that. So standing kind of right at the sort of along Woodfin, looking back that direction.
So just what I wanted to comment on, and we can zoom into phase one, Dave, for the sake of more clarity. It's been our intention and still is to deliver a significant office building as part of this mixed use phase one. That would be what's seen in blue, building one. We are also having been through some heavy recruitment in the market. We're not seeing that, especially with market conditions the way they are. We're not seeing enough demand to justify that scale of office delivery here. We have more in phase two, so we still think it's an important part of the recipe, but may not be as strong, or at least we're preparing for assessing the market to see how we can pivot. One of those areas is in multifamily. So we're actively assessing the market for the right fit into this. It's already included, a significant amount of units are already included, and those units range in affordability throughout the master plan. We didn't talk a lot about it, but phase two includes more than 100 units of LIHTC, what we think is going to end up being a LIHTC project, as well as market rate, as well as workforce integrated to that market rate product, most likely. And in phase one, again, assessing the market, we know there's a need for housing throughout the affordable spectrum, including market rate homes. So we are looking at building one currently. Dave, if you can pivot here and maybe show some of our 3D modeling that reflects that. So we have what could still working within the height zones that have been established in our application, and lesser so than what existing zoning allows. We're starting to show a few different concepts of what multifamily could take shape and look like. There's some positive sides and some challenges that we're dealing with from a buildability side. But the activation along Charlotte, I think, increases. But Dave, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about this, and then really interested to get both the committee's opinion and staff if you're here too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the simple version is we are looking at opportunities for residential to become a little bit more wrapping around the site, if you will. You could start to imagine, again, Charlotte having the gateway and having a little bit more sort of activation both at the higher levels. This would put us in a 200 to 300 key sort of situation. I mean, we don't imagine that you could imagine that we're showing roughly maxing out what the 145 foot looks like. This is 136 to that occupied level, so it's slightly below. That would be pretty intensive for residential.
Don't really see that happening, but we did want to just part of the design task. Dave, show us what we can put here.
Right. So we're trying to stay even below what, again, what's allowed to be here is 265 foot up to this line, right? So like your current 265 foot line floats right about in here. And that's our mission isn't to max out this site is not the goal. It's more the totality of porosity. I've used that word earlier, hearing other people of like, how do you move people through the buildings, creating mid-block, to be quite frank, these are very small footprints. This is 13,000 square foot. It's hard, we can't be any smaller than that and be, that's a difficult enough footprint. So how we're trying to break some of these down, these footprints are a little larger for residential, but when you go back to being an office footprint, for example, this guy here is also fairly small. We're only at an 18,000 square foot footprint for these guys. So those are minimum typical, and I know it's Asheville, so things are more granular, small scale. Part of the reason big users have a challenge coming to Asheville is it's hard to find 100,000 square foot. You have a lot of 2,000 square foots and 10,000 square foots, maybe on the bigger side. But I know these buildings have some weight to them, but at the same time, they are fair on the industry standard. These are small footprints.
Kate?
Yeah, I like the porosity, the language you're using, and I like that the buildings are broken up. And I want to talk about all those spaces in between, because I think those are the spaces that people are going to use the most, right? Even though they're small or narrow, there are the spaces that have such the potential to be such a strong part of this property. But I would also point out that those don't just have the special narrow urban streets that we all love don't just happen by accident, and right. They can. So you probably, sounds like you already thought about this. Asheville, we have really cold winters and wind tunnels, and just thinking about what the buildings will create, and then how do we still create something that pulls people through and don't end up being empty or dark throughout the year, because even though it is cold and we do have rough winters, people are out all year round here and using these outdoor spaces. So I think it's programming, what's happening at the ground floor. I think it's lighting. I think it's materials. I think it's all of the richness packed into these really small spaces. And so what that means is, again, like a really a dedication to designing those spaces and not just letting them be these leftover spaces that we hope people will come and move through.
Yeah, you're spot on. It is that what I call the cruise ship director mentality, in a positive way. It takes curation. We can make beautiful spaces. In fact, we can put the best materials and we can put all of the urban amenities and all of those things. But if they're not curated, it's the programming. All of y'all seen this. You've probably seen really terrible buildings that were really well programmed and curated, that were great, amazing urban places. And then you've seen amazing buildings that weren't really well curated and they weren't as rich as an urban environment. So obviously we want both is our goal. And so we hear you.
Yes, that's the potential. And then because I mentioned the programming, you talked about those green spaces as you mentioned the church or the YMCA using those for programming, but just again, like, I know this is really early, but starting to think about how that actually happens after this space if it is this flexible open space, having a plan or buy-in early on or something to make sure that someone is in charge of it, or that it's shared, or that there is a commitment to that, or else maybe think about a different way to use that space. But just that I've worked on projects that then nothing happens and then they fall into disrepair. And so those are the things that are hard because they're not physical design, right? We're designing it for something we're hoping will happen. And so trying to build those partnerships and caretakers in a way along the way.
That was a lot of discussion in the good news is both the church and the Y are very active in community planning, right? And I say community engagement planning, activity planning. And so that was a lot of discussion in our vision sessions. So our anticipation is the broader stakeholder group. And I'm not trying to assign the church and the why only to doing this, but that's kind of been the conversation of what you're describing. How do you sort of program and bring activity to these spaces?
Real quick, I would say, piggybacking on what Kate was talking about with building 3, I think you can actually connect those up above and make that space like a portal space that you can kind of pass through some stuff.
Yeah,
I think you can do some connections there on different levels, and I think that would be fun. Robert, regarding your question, I from both the design perspective and then from the downtown commission. So from the downtown commission perspective, we would be super excited to see more residential, especially residential, coming in first. Jeremy could probably speak better to what the office market is here in downtown Asheville, but finding 13,000 square foot users, filling that thing up with office space, that's a lift. Whereas residential, I think you could do that and get the project kick started. And just as a downtown user, I'm always excited to see a residential project bringing more people into downtown. So I like that. And then as a designer, watching you wrap more of the building around and over the parking, and that activated that corner we were just talking about at College in Charlotte. So there's a lot of positives to me in making a move similar to that.
Can you go back to that, Dave, just so we can look at that balance of design on the multifamily, just as Brian was talking about? Now, that's our general assessment too, that housing would be well received, or at least it's needed, especially downtown. So very interested in your comments on that.
I think that would be a fantastic
Robin,
first building.
Oh, no.
I'm muted.
Sorry, Robin.
Didn't know because I turned off my camera instead of my. Anyway, that's exactly what I was going to say, Brian. I really like the addition of the residential in that phase 1. I think wrapping that corner, wrapping that garage, activating that street. And we were mentioning before how that's kind of a dead zone. Nobody walks there. But one way to make sure people walk there is live there. So that would be a great addition to phase 1. And I would personally like to see more housing in this project than was originally shown too. So I think that that's a great move.
Yeah, I think we had like 600 units overall. Robert, is that kind of?
Yeah, that was our what we set as the maximum delivery of residential, and we may be increasing that from when we revise and resubmit. Should we continue to head in this direction?
I also like the height addition there with this scheme. I feel like it gives it less of a jump from super tall to. I mean, I like this direction way better than what you showed.
It had these were similar heights here, but to your point, you can kind of see, I plug back to the green roof. We actually did imagine this being green roof. Like we hadn't gone through and thought about all of them being green roof. So that's interesting to consider. But to your point about.
Real quick, I don't think anybody's going to require you to do all green roofs. We're going to say we're going to want you to incorporate some green roofs in the project.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's too heavy a lift.
Right. And that's something we can keep that conversation going. But yeah, you can kind of get a sense of like, where you see, let's see here. We can do a little camera 1, camera 2. So
I like
to your
height on Charlotte Street, I think that really helps.
Well, you're right, because that experience here too of coming in along, you've kind of it's almost jarring a little bit because you're coming off the highway. It's, hopefully doing 60 miles an hour and not speeding like the one time I got the ticket not too long ago. But it does immediately slow you down. And then things like this would help visually slow you down from a greater distance. Because you start to see sort of cues of building and sort of visual, I'll call it visual distractions in a good way. Both have some of those qualities, but to your point, you get a little bit more of that. It is such a wide street section, that's the kind of vibe. I can turn on context in this guy here. Hold on a second, so that they're both a little bit equal. And we do have the kind of the city. When we do this we're mapped in here. So to the best of our abilities.
I think it is helpful to see the relationship of height between some of the taller masses in downtown already. What else? I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but also this has been really productive for us already. So I don't know if anyone has wanted to share something but hasn't been able to, but just eager to get your feedback in the last few minutes we have.
Well, I'll say that you talked about office floor plates. I think one of the best things about Asheville is we don't have national companies here, too many of them. So I would not be disappointed if your office floor plates ended up small enough that it only attracted smaller firms.
Yeah, and that is the idea. That's what we feel comfortable. But having, I've worked, and we agree with you. We understand Asheville. I was a part of the New Belgium project, and that hopefully that could be better a good thing or a bad thing. Years ago as a part of a different firm, and have been, spent a lot of time in Asheville, spent a lot of time in Black Mountain and have a little place there. So we're definitely in tune with that. Just wanted to point out, when you see these buildings, they do look, the big, but when you put them in the scale of things, a typical office plate looks to be around 30 to 36,000 square foot. We're not trying to be typical. So at the 18,000, we're sort of half, if you will, of where a more traditional office floor plate would be. And to your point, that's the goal, is to attract the sort of boutique. We use the word granular a lot, because that's the sort of, it's not giant, oversized.
I'm just going to throw in, as a Ashevillean from a different generation, that I respectfully disagree. I think we need jobs. So yeah, I think there's a balance of both, but I appreciate the perspective that you guys are bringing to the project.
Jeremy?
I'm a little older than Christina, but I would agree with her as well. I don't think making some room for some larger companies that could provide a more stable employment base in any way, shape, or form keeps out the smaller businesses.
Right.
We're looking for them. That is still our intention. We enjoy knowing that we still will have great opportunity in phase 2 if it doesn't materialize in the same way for the office use in phase 1. So we think it can be part of a good economic development, delivery solution to have that type of Class A offering in downtown. Dave just grew our building. What?
Yeah.
But go ahead, David, and then maybe we give it back to Will, just because I know everyone's professionals on this, and I think our schedule is till 2. Okay.
Yeah, we are technically scheduled till 2, but we can meet for as long as we want. It will not kick us off necessarily. I know in the past we've kind of done a 2 p.m. time check for projects to allow committee members to get back to their day jobs. So if they need to to drop off, and felt like their comments have been heard and addressed, and they're welcome to. The project team wants to stick around and talk through some more details with other remaining committee members. I think even staff had a few questions if the design team wanted to hang around and chat with staff a little bit if we have time. So
Yeah, I do. I'm fine with on time.
okay. Are there any other questions from the committee? I saw one from Michael earlier asking about any way to I'll kind of paraphrase commemorate the original location, the site of the Thomas Wolfe House. It's interesting idea.
Yeah, let me make a note of that. Hold on I've turned this one into our vision board here.
And some of these things might come at later phases. This is very high level type review, kind of setting the building envelopes for the development, so that when it comes back for the final round at some point, we'll kind of know the box within which these buildings can be built, and then trying to get any technical modifications through the design, through the conditional zoning process, so that if there are parts of the CBD and code and other parts of the UDO the project can't meet, we know what those are ahead of time and adjust accordingly. So that's obviously the purview of where we will be in the next few months reviewing this project. Are there any questions or comments from committee members? So I guess, I know we have a lot of planning and urban design staff on the line. They might just have a couple ideas and questions, and maybe just give them a chance to ask them. If committee members need to leave, feel free to drop off. If you want to hang around, maybe there'll be some stuff that you'll be interested in hearing about a little bit more, but we'll just kind of take advantage of the time that we have together since we're all here. So any staff want to ask any questions or give any comments while we're on the line now? Yeah, Dave.
Yeah, thanks. Very nice presentation, nice models. This is a question that kind of was brought up already, but Central Avenue is a key corridor, pedestrian bike corridor to most of our residential neighborhoods to the north. So I was just more curious, how are you treating that streetscape? What kind of sidewalk widths are there? And I guess just a general comment on sidewalk widths in general. 10 feet is our minimum width, but especially project of this scale, would be nice to have wider sidewalks on the public streets. Definitely, especially when they're up against some of the larger buildings, to have a narrow sidewalk like that. It would be, I think, important to make those sidewalks larger.
Yeah, you want to bring me back to one of our questions is part of it is the build to line. So we were going back to, these buildings are supposed to be built to the property line. This is built to the property line, which then leaves us with a 10-foot sidewalk. If we can move it back a couple of feet and not be to a build to line, it gets into one of our sort of technical modifications. There's one of the things. So 12-foot would be nice when you start thinking of a 5-foot tree grate and then a 12-foot section, then that leaves us 7 feet left over. So you could have a 2-foot Parisian two-top and then a 5-foot clear walk, or, some variations. We are keeping broader where possible, and that it's been balancing out that. One of the questions we had, and I kind of put it back to you, is, some of the standards is a 26-foot drive for some interior drives for fire access. Is anybody insight on the flexibility we might be given there? Because if we could be at a more narrow street section here, we don't need 26 foot for cars. We don't want 26 foot for the cars in here. We're giving it because we think it's a technical requirement, but that would give us, we were looking really, could you go down to like 11-foot drive and be a 22-foot sort of section? Because again, this isn't about cars, it's about people. We're just giving the option for cars to be there. That would give us
In response to that, I can't speak for the fire department and we would have to have that conversation, but I know we've been pushing for actually 20-foot wide, 10-foot lanes in downtown and have been successful to really slow people down and put pedestrians first. So I think that's a real conversation we could easily have because we have done it within the city and other places. And the build to line, you know, the main point of that is to have sidewalks come up to the building, not as much to have a building come to the property line, is to have that pedestrian realm meet the building. So we continually allow for wider sidewalks so long they come up to the building. To look at that, that would not be a difficult request through a CZ process. If you had wider sidewalks and those sidewalks went up to the building. In fact, that would be preferred.
Yeah, I concur with that. There is some language in the UDO that says, you know, setbacks up to 20 feet for uses in the district, providing courtyard or plaza spaces, which is somewhat of a flexible term that I think if we're envisioning outdoor dining uses and that kind of thing, and depending on the design. And so I think maybe that could cover it in some ways, but the fact that we have a conditional zoning process that we can take advantage of, and that the design intent is to have the sidewalk against the building, I think that all can work together pretty well. And definitely having a wider sidewalk, some more relief along that right of way for that really tall building would be beneficial.
Right. For example, one of our requests was the technical modification was like, this is 1/3 meeting it, where it was 2/3 of your street meeting it versus this is like 1/3, and then allowing setbacks. So we specifically did that so that like we have more room here and then have more room here, for example, but then this is meeting more of the minimum for those. So just some kind of, so you're asking a really good question. This one, we were more intentful of putting it directly to the build to line because back to this is these street sections along Woodfin and Oak are not are broader than 70 foot. So we had more flexibility where this one doesn't have that same flexibility. So, you know, we were trying to show, well, here's what happens if you put that, you know, based on the way we might have been misreading the code, but putting it to the build to line and then giving more relief at the corners where we thought, you know, that would be a fair ask. But you could start to imagine, you know, based on our technical modification requests of only 1/3 of this kind of meeting and then allowing it to kind of relief more or whatever, that was the intent anyways of that request.
Yeah, and I think what I've heard from committee members, maybe at this meeting and then from staff generally too, is thinking about how that tall building can work in a way that doesn't overshadow Charlotte Street. There's like a mixed use hotel project planned across the street that, I don't know if I guess your design incorporates that new building. Looks like it.
Yeah, right.
So
it's about as long, if you will. It's the same kind of.
So then it kind of steps down to Central where this, your project would be more of a statement. So anyway, trying to think of ways, design features, materials, fenestration to minimize those kinds of visual impacts. So it doesn't feel, you know, like a canyon in any way along Central would go a long way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
I
do
think-
that at this, particularly at the residential building here.
What were you gonna say, Christina?
I was just going to jump in quickly and say what it feels right now to me when you look at the massing and the street is a lot like what you see with the Staples building on Merriman. And I think anyone from Asheville who's experienced that knows how I think it met all the requirements, but it's a terrible experience for that street. And this is a much smaller, more local street. So it would be great to see that activated.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I would point out kind of while it's not the same, you know, our massings are kind of being somewhat generic. well, this would be the only place we've spent some time giving you a little bit more illustrative, just to give you a sense of what happens when you start to break down the scale or doing what we're imagining. This is not a final design. It's not the design. It's just an urban illustrative. So that's just to give you some sense of, we definitely hear where you're coming from.
No layer cake designs. Thank you.
No layer cakes.
All right. Any last comments or questions or thoughts to share today? Once going twice.
I guess,
alrighty.
sorry,
Yeah,
just one more
ahead.
comment. I do just want to say that what you're showing there at the Y building now, I think is going in the right direction. I mean, you're showing the activation of the street. So don't mean to only have negative comments, but I think what you're saying and the fact that as it develops, it starts to get that street activation. I hope to see that on Central Avenue. So it's exciting to see that you're going in that direction on the buildings that are further developed.
Yeah, we agree. And it's like the fine line of how much massing articulation do we show at this scale, knowing that these individual architects will be coming in as well. So this isn't going to be one architect does all these buildings. So we're, that sort of gray zone of trying to show a height and bulk and area, not making it just a completely dumb box, but not also making it completely over articulated that may not ever, so it's, but we do believe in what you're talking about.
Great. Well, I want to thank the committee members for taking time out of their schedule to sort of join us in this specially scheduled meeting. If you all have any, parting thoughts or things you think about tonight while cooking dinner or something, you can feel free to send them to me by email and I can forward them along to the design team as well. I'm sure we'll be in touch this week and next to talk about next steps and kind of check in with the project. And in the meantime, just want to thank everyone for their time and great discussion today, and hope you all have a great day.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you.